Okay, so welcome William Parker to the Bronx African American History Project. William Parker is a legendary and innovative jazz bassist, and we're very glad to have you here. So we'll begin by all our interviews by asking, tell us a little bit about your family and how they ended up in the Bronx.
Okay. My mother, Mary Louise Jefferson, was born in Orangeburg, South Carolina, and my father, Thomas Parker, Deutsch Parker, was born in Goldsboro, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. I believe they met up here in New York at the Savoy Manor or the Audubon Ballroom. I think it was the Savoy Manor, mm-hmm. listening to music,
right.
Jazz. And they were married, and eventually got an apartment at 1351 Washington Avenue in the Bronx, between, that's like 169th Street and 168th Street.
Right.
Why they came here, my mother was the oldest of 9 children, and she is also in the South. You may have a family where you have 9 kids in one family, and then I think her mother died, and then her father remarried and had a second family. But I think there eventually all the kids were moving, brothers and sisters were moving up north. Some of my uncles were in the Army, Armed Forces, but they all ended up in Harlem or the Bronx.
Right.
Because that's where people were migrating from.
Mm-hmm.
My father, a little different story. I think he came up very early when he was a teenager. As his sister, my Bessie, lived up here in Harlem. She might have been married already. And he came here to work and to better himself. Mm-hmm. You know, he worked in as a pin setter in the bowling alley.
Wow.
And you know, when you knock with the pins, you have people setting them. He worked in a slaughterhouse where they slaughtered chickens. But my father would never eat chicken. And the reason is because I found out he worked at a slaughterhouse. There's 2 things he wouldn't eat. He wouldn't eat chicken, and he wouldn't eat cheesecake, because he also worked in a cheesecake bakery. And at the cheesecake bakery, I guess the guy next to him would always be going like this into the cheesecake batter with his ashes. So it just gave, you know, like, oh, we don't eat cheesecake, we don't eat chicken. But he had other jobs. He ended up working for Morris Paul on East Broadway, and he learned how to repair furniture. Like it was a furniture store, but if they got a nick or a scratch, mm-hmm. they'd give it to him, and then he'd fill it in and make it look
right.
new. So that's what he did, and then he had a love for music, and I don't know where that came from, but he had a love for jazz, because nobody else that I know, my mother's family, nor his family, really had a love for music the way he did.
Uh-huh.
He really had that. And then they met and got married.
Mm-hmm. So what are your earliest recollections of the Bronx? You know, so it was on Washington Avenue between 168th and 169th.
Well, I remember there being a oh, actually, this is where my memory and reality clash. because I remember what I thought in one instance was going from that house, but I had photographs of me and my mother on the roof when I was a baby, wrapped in a blanket, and I think the house burnt down.
Right. Now, was this a private house that
Yes,
they had?
it was a tenement building. Maybe it could have been a brownstone.
Oh, right, okay.
We'd have to look at old photographs to see what was there.
Right.
1351 was the number. And so what happened was, there might have been an interim house we stayed at, but, which I don't remember, but we were put in the Melrose project.
Okay, so you moved into the Melrose houses.
Yeah.
And how old were you when?
I must have been 6, 7 years old.
Okay.
That I remember.
Right, yeah.
You know, and that was 156th Street, Melrose
Yeah,
Avenue.
yeah, and we've done some interviews with people from, and what were your recollections of the Melrose houses? What year were you born, by the way?
1952, Bronx Hospital.
Okay, so this is in the late 50s that you
Yeah.
arrived in Melrose. So what was your recollection of that particular housing development as a child?
Well, it was the trees and a big lawn, which I go back there now and it's like, it's not very big. But when you're a kid, it's very big. Our playground where we played, across the street from the Melrose houses was the Patterson.
Right,
houses.
which we know very well.
And, you know, one of the first things we were told is you don't come over to the Patterson houses, you know. Like, where are you from? Well, we're from Melrose, you stay in Melrose.
Right.
Don't cross to the Patterson.
Right, okay.
There's memories of, the images of it were of these chains that sort of, you had to go over to walk on the grass.
On the grass, right. Yeah.
The sprinklers would come up and have that round thing. And the construction, because across the street they were building the Webster houses.
Right.
And we were told when the new Claremont projects were built, we'd be moving from Melrose to Claremont.
Right.
But it was a place, I remember we took the bus to school, PS2, and PS3.
Where was your
Fulton Avenue.
Fulton Avenue? Hi, oh, the food is here? Yeah, one moment. So you took the bus to Fulton Avenue to go to elementary school.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a fairly long trip.
Yeah, it was on 169, from 156 to 169, but you had to walk. But my mother trained us to do it by ourselves.
Right.
She
So you were going in the bus by the time you were 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Right. Which was, you know, you're not the only person
I also remember we used to get fresh milk delivered.
to your door.
Yeah.
In the Melrose houses?
Yeah.
Wow. Now, was Melrose multiracial when you were a child, in terms of the families living there, or was it predominantly black and Latino?
As far as I can recall, it was predominantly black and Latino. But when I got to the Claremont houses, there were Italian families, and there was even a Jewish family, the Abets, A-B-A-T-E.
Right. Now, so you moved from Melrose to the Claremont houses.
Yeah, maybe when I was 10 or 11.
Right, okay. Now, were you at all familiar with the little Italian neighborhood near the Melrose houses? Did that?
Well, across from where we were was a pizza shop, I know, and a deli. But I was not aware of an Italian neighborhood.
Right.
Because I didn't know what an Italian was.
Okay.
Okay. So we just kind of did what we did, and we weren't really that conscious of
Right.
who was living around us.
Okay.
And that, when we got to Claremont, it was a little different. We did have some Italian people, but after the first year, if I recall, all the non-black and Spanish people moved.
Moved out, right.
They moved out
Mhm.
from the projects, and I guess they realized they were in the project. They didn't like it. They wanted to get a house, and also my relatives were all buying houses in the upper part of
In the upper part of the Bronx.
Yeah,
Okay,
Needham Avenue.
Sure.
Off the Grand Concourse, Gun Hill Road.
Uh-huh.
They were buying houses up there, and that
Yeah.
was kind of the goal.
The goal, if you were an upwardly mobile family, is to
Yeah.
buy your own home.
Yeah, my family was not didn't think that way.
Uh-huh.
My mother would have loved it, but my father was kind of he was into, I guess, his own political system in a way. You know, like he was into talking about Apache Indians. Geronimo was one of his heroes.
Wow.
And how he would, Geronimo, music, some sports,
Uh-huh.
but what's his name, Marcus Garvey.
Right. So there was a lot of political discussion in your home coming from your father?
Well, he would just somehow say things. It wasn't any discussion. We didn't talk to our fathers then.
Uh-huh.
You know, you just said you were afraid of your father.
Uh-huh.
And then they said, well, why are you afraid of your father? And he said, well, I don't know. We're not really afraid of him. Because, my father would come downstairs, we were playing sports, and he'd buy everybody ice cream. So, okay. He never yelled at me. He never hit me. It was always like, listen to this music, Duke Ellington, listen to this, listen to that, listen to that. So I said, well, Jesus. And then, because I met other people's fathers, and there were some fathers you didn't want to deal with, because they were, they drank, they hit their kids. So there was this unexplainable kind of little distance with my father, but he was kind of watching and always there to sort of help us out.
Wow. Now, how many siblings did you have?
I have one brother.
And older or younger?
He was 2 years old, about a year and a half older than me.
Uh-huh. So there were the four of you?
Yeah, four of us. And then one day my father came home and gave me a trumpet, gave my brother a saxophone, and he said, you're going to learn how to play this.
How old were you
I
when?
was about 8 or 9.
Wow.
And so my mother took my brother up to Harlem to study with a saxophone player named Fats Green. And then I went to the New York Music School, which was on 149th Street and 3rd Avenue, so somewhere around Willis Avenue, somewhere around.
And this was in the Bronx?
Yeah, in the Bronx. And so I went from trumpet to trombone to cello to eventually bass. But my father didn't have a car. All my relatives had cars. My mother's family had cars. My father's family was different than my mother's family. My father's family, he had 3 sisters who lived in 145th Street up in Harlem. They had kids, but they were all kind of more grassroots and gritty. They didn't really, their aspirations were quite differently. My mother's side of the family was, which I totally understood, was to get a job at the post office, get a civil service job, because it was a job that you could keep and there were benefits from the job. And it wasn't for me, but I understood why.
Right.
If you're domestic and you come up in the South, why working, a job like that would help.
Mm-hmm.
And their ultimate goal was to turn around and go back down south, which they all did.
Yeah, and buy property down there?
Yeah, buy property.
So that was, you made, got a civil service job here,
Yeah.
and then went down to retire there and in your own home.
Yeah, those that wanted to.
And this is in South Carolina?
South Carolina, in Orangeburg, South Carolina.
Uh-huh.
And some of them would buy, and they didn't believe in they only paid cash for things. They didn't believe in layaway plans.
Mm-hmm.
So they would save money, and when they got enough money, they'd buy land and buy someone to build a house, pay someone to build a house. But we didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't happen for us. It
Right.
wasn't really
Yeah.
the way
Now, was academics stressed in your house? In terms of pressure to do well in school?
No. What was stress was Duke Ellington, listen to music. That's all that was really stress. My mother, of course, wanted us to do well in school, and we were, we were quite alert and astute as far as academics.
Mm-hmm.
Reading at an early age,
Right.
and things like that. But it was something that we didn't do headstands over.
Right, okay. So what was your school experience like? Were you encouraged in your musical interest in school when you were in elementary school and junior high?
Well, my brother, they found out he could play the saxophone. So he would play saxophone recitals in the school auditorium.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know what I did,
Mm-hmm.
so they didn't bother me. But I didn't like school.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like school from day one. I didn't like school because I had my own kind of world at home with my electric trains and my building buildings and erector sets
Yeah.
and
So you had all of that stuff. I
Yeah.
remember that, the trains and the erector sets in
Yeah.
the 50s.
and because my father brought home Lionel trains, for us, but my brother didn't play with them. I played with them. So when it was like, oh, you got to go to school, it's like, oh man, it's just it's like, and you go to school and then you become social. And so the first day you're in school, you're sitting there minding your own business, and someone would go, pop, hit you in the head, and it's like, whoa. I could have been home like in my nice world. Why are you doing this to me? And then so you didn't have to begin to deal with. But what I would do in school is I had very strong discipline. So I would just sit all day like this with my hands folded, and everybody was crazy running around, and I just sit there. So I always got excellent and stuff because I was well behaved. And my marks were okay too, but I got a lot of
excellent in conduct.
excellent in conduct.
Yes, I remember those conduct grades.
And that made a lot. That meant a lot for the teachers because, that we PS2, and then when you went to junior high school 55.
Where was that located?
That was St. Paul's place. It was.
I know where that is.
Yeah,
Same.
it's on. Where is it? Because it's on Washington Avenue.
Yeah.
Around there.
Yeah,
Before
I
you
know
get
that
to
area.
Bathgate.
Yeah.
And it was a fun school in a way, but it was also because that's when you met your characters. You met the principal, Mr. Ryan. He would come out and shoot hoops with the people, and but then you began to see like sports and individualism in like, you don't tell me what to do, rebellion, guys who were like very academically advanced in a way, and it was and you had to find your niche there.
Yeah. Did they have a school band or orchestra at that school?
Yeah. We had Mr. Grosser was the woodwind teacher, and Mr. Nathanson was the string teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I began playing cello.
Wow. Uh-huh.
Because Mr. Nathanson was a very, very, looked kind of like Leonard Bernstein.
Uh-huh.
And he was very frustrated, but he could like take a music stand and throw it like a javelin across the room. And you'd have to duck. And he locked the door. But it was cool. I loved it. I loved it, you know. And then he had all these, we had a lot of different people in the class who had, you know, nicknames, Scoop, Peebo, the Downs brothers, and they were all very talented, you know. So we played some symphonic stuff, we played some folk stuff, and music was fun. But then some people in the school, they had like a schedule. They had we had this guy named Weezer, and he would have like shop, gym, lunch, shop. And they used to have these schools at that time called the six.
Oh, the famous. Oh, yeah, I know all about the.
Yeah. And so they sent you to, because they would label people. They would label people like, okay, you're not going to. You know, so like what the famous story is that Mr. Pesaroff, our guidance counselor, and he taught some other things. He brought all the boys in the room, and he said, you know, I got to tell you guys something. You're never going to be anything. You're going to be pushing racks in the garment district or be messengers. So you better go to a, because in those days they had academic schools, high schools, and they had vocational
high school.
So
right.
I said, you better go to a vocational high school and learn a trade. And what was wrong with that is that a trade was fine. But the idea that you didn't have a choice, they're telling you that you could
Right.
not, that you know, you aren't going to be anything.
It sounds like on a Malcolm X autobiography.
Oh,
you know.
does it? Yeah.
Yeah, there was a story where the teacher said, you know, he said he wanted to be a lawyer, and he said, "You."
Yeah. Well, we weren't. He wasn't like, well, William, you can be a lawyer, doctor. Yeah, you can, you know, you can be a writer. You can, you know, all the professions. It was more like, you're not going to be anything.
Jesus. So you weren't encouraged to aim for like college when you were in, or anything like
I
that.
wasn't encouraged to aim for anything in school, but on the peripheral, I was very, very lucky to have certain, and this is in junior high school and high school, but we would get like a substitute teacher who would come in, like Mr. Hoffman, who came in, and the first thing he said, "I'm a communist." And so people like throwing stuff, because it's substitute teachers, but he said that, and then the next day, you know, I'm reading the New Communist Manifesto. You know, and he's talking about the military industrial complex. He's talking about things about Social Security and health care. And so, of course, nobody paid attention to him, but I heard him. And it really lit me up to say, okay, now I go to the library now, and I begin to go down an aisle, and I turn the corner, and books would say, "Come over here."
Damn.
And so.
Where was your local library, by the way?
The local library in Claremont was, well, in Melrose, it was on, I think it was on Melrose Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
In Claremont Project, it was on Boston Road somewhere, up the hill.
Oh, up the hill, the Morrisania Library.
Yeah.
Oh, so you went all the way up there.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow,
There's also a library in the school.
Right.
But, so I began just doing self-education.
Wow.
I found out about Thomas Dewey.
Uh-huh.
And the idea, the Pavlovian theory about how school is kind of a place where if you give the right answers, you get a treat. And the idea that, well, it wasn't about making you think. Then I got another teacher named Mr. Slotkin, who would give us assignments like define virtue, define truth, define justice. Of course, nobody handed it in except me, but I loved it. I mean, so then I began to wherever I was, began to get an idea that, wow, I'm like on a what I call now a destiny line. That I run into people, I meet people, and I'm supposed to meet them.
Huh.
And they were right there for me at that particular time.
Damn.
Yeah. And so Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Hellman, man, I still remember these teachers because they always were talking about an alternative idea. Even guys like Mr. Raggio, who was a Spanish teacher, who on Fridays would come in with an Hawaiian shirt, and he'd lock the door, and he'd put on Harry Belafonte, and just make us, and nobody said, what is wrong with this guy? But he'd put on Harry Belafonte and Joan Baez,
Yep.
Where Have All the Flowers Gone? And so he was beginning to play Cuban music, play all this different stuff, and he'd just be dancing around. Because the other 4 days, you know, he had to be straight. And then we had another substitute teacher. His name was Mr. Mayberry. And he'd always come in with a tuxedo. I'm trying to say, man, what's wrong with this guy? He'd come with a tuxedo and he'd go like this. He says, okay, do what you want to do. He'd go out and go to sleep. And but then one day he came in and he had a case. And so somebody said, you know, what's in the case? He said, that's my trumpet. He was coming home from gigs and then going to substitute teach.
Got it.
So he took out his trumpet one day and this guy could play. You know. So again, that was another guy out of nowhere that just came and says, oh, thank you, Mr. Mayberry. You know, you know, it was okay to be yourself. Because that was a whole thing, you know, growing up, is that do you follow what's prescribed, the prescription that's written for you, and how do you resist that prescription, and how do you become yourself, and what is that self? And how do you feel comfortable being that self? You know, because everyone becomes insecure, but if you step into a cloud, you can become yourself. Because you said, well, what saved you? You said, well, you know, when my teacher said you can't be anything, it went in this ear and out the other ear because I was in a cloud. I was thinking about, you know, Langston Hughes or Kenneth Patchen or some lofty thing that I was interested in, and or reading the dialogues of you know, Socrates. That because one of the other assignments was to read the Republic,
Mm-hmm.
and so I got that book. And then one of the other things was to read the Compassionate Teachings of Buddha. So all of these things were like dropping on my head, and so I didn't know that the projects were like a you know, well, you know, you're stacking people up, because I didn't really, you know, I didn't care. I mean, it's well, you move from a tenement to a project. There were no roaches, and no rodents in the projects.
Right.
I mean, people did strange things in the projects.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they like, you said, well, is this an elevator or is this a urinal? And he said, well, I think it's an elevator, but so then what's that corner for? You know, so you can't wait till you get to your house? You know, so like people, you know, that's when I began to learn about black people are very interesting. You know, they're very interesting. You know, like people will like say, well, okay, dear. And it's not just black people, it's you know, it's people who live in the project, let's say. You know, it's okay, can you change the baby's diaper? Oh, sure, dear. So you change the baby's diaper. Yeah. And then here's the dirty diaper. Oh, wait a second. Shh. Shh. So, wait, what was that about? Yeah, and they said, okay, let's have some. And I know this because later on I worked in the housing project.
Right.
I worked in the Madison projects. I worked in the Bronx, and the project I lived in actually for a while. And so you'd be out there cleaning the grass, and here comes some water. Here comes some watermelon rinds down on you. Here comes some baby diapers, and it's those kind of things you can't figure out. But if you don't understand it, then you label people, and and you kind of, oh, all these people are this. But no, they're not all these people. These people are not this. They're human beings, and they happen to throw diapers out the window. But for whatever reason, and they happen to do some self-destructive things. But you kind of learn, to understand people, on levels that are beyond what you see. Even the gangster types in the neighborhood who like, oh God, like, oh, this guy's, Puerto Rican Frankie's. I was one guy we called Puerto Rican Frankie. He says, oh God. So, you're looking out your window before you go out. He's walking back and forth doing his patrols. It's like, wow, you got to pay him his money, or he's gonna harass you. So then, as soon as he leaves, then you run downstairs. But then after a while, you begin to understand. At least I did. This guy, and you talk to him, and you come to some kind of understanding that he's going to be what he is, and you learn how to deal. And after a while, you can wear your colors, you can wear your, because we're looking at record covers and trying to dress like musicians, and everybody else is, doing what they're doing, playing basketball. You had guys whose fathers played basketball with them, and you get to understand people. And I think it's very important to understand people and not demonize people, and not put people in categories and classes. He's bad, he's good, he's this, he's that. Because then you begin to understand, junkies. You begin to understand people who came in the barbershop and who guys who never worked but had a lot of money. You say, the numbers runners, the drug dealers. And they'd always come in and immaculate with a big wad of money all the time, buy everybody lunch. So it wasn't like, oh, these guys are bad, because you didn't really, I was too afraid to do anything bad. That was my personality. So.
Did you ever get involved in sports when you were coming up?
Oh yeah, you had to be. Well, you didn't have to be. Because if you weren't involved in sports, then you'd be upstairs reading books or staying away from that. But if you were going to play, we played basketball, softball, hard baseball. I played in the junior varsity at Taft High School.
Okay.
And then later on, I played in the Buddy Young Football League.
Right.
Down in River Avenue, Jerome Avenue, down there near Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
And that was fun until, kind of playing music kind of took over and kind of dominated my activity at that time.
Huh.
But, sports was, again, very interesting characters, very interesting people, because a lot of the people on our football team were married, they had kids, because the age limit was 18, but that didn't really stop people who were older from playing. And, like the St. Nicholas Vikings, we'd play them, and they'd be there was a chuck full of nuts at River Avenue, at Jerome Avenue there, and they'd be like smoking cigarettes on the 40-yard line before the kickoff. And the referees would have, this guy, one ref had a little pistol, and he said, I got to protect myself. Yeah. So it was a kind of a funny football league, but I did that, and it gives you it was nothing sterile about any of that.
Well, it sounds like you had an inner sort of self-confidence that you could do things your way.
Yeah, just
Well,
yeah,
that's pretty-
luck or what, you know, whatever. I don't know what you call it, but when I ran into other people, musicians from the Bronx, I found out that, you know, just up the block on Washington Avenue
Mm-hmm.
were guys who went to music and art,
Mm-hmm.
you know, who were very, very good musicians, who just lived in the neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
And then later on, the housing authority had a housing authority symphony orchestra.
Really?
Yeah.
For the all of New York City?
Yeah.
Housing authority?
Yeah, it still might exist. Check it out.
Mm-hmm.
The housing authority symphony orchestra. And I didn't audition because I wasn't symphonically trained necessarily, but I thought about it. I said, well, let me. But I was happy it existed, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so it was really, I mean, I would still have been living in those projects if I didn't keep, all the music I wanted to play was downtown.
Right.
So I kept going from, you know, I used to even sometimes walk from the Bronx to Lower East Side with my instrument on my back. I go to 155th Street, cross the bridge, and walk down 8th Avenue.
Damn, all the way to the village?
Yep, all the way to the village.
How old were you when you were doing that?
Like 17, 18.
Jesus. So, at what point did you start playing Well, let me just go from there. Did you ever go to see live music in the Bronx at clubs and theaters?
Well, I played at clubs. I used to play at a place called the Salt and Pepper, which was up the hill on 67th Street between Jerome and whatever the next street is. And he had a place called the Sugar and Spice,
Uh-huh.
which was on 163rd Street. There was a club on Brook Avenue we used to play at. I never went to hear bands. I mean, I would go hear a band if they were doing a concert at a library, if they were playing at a, I have to go to that. I don't think there were any concerts at the museums, but that's when I would hear music in the Bronx. And then later on, you know, when I was living downtown, would come back to the Bronx. I played a lot of different places in the Bronx. There were a lot of clubs up near White Plains Road,
Right.
and different spots. But it was, you know, my brother got stabbed one night, Saturday night, and that was you know, he was in a pizza shop and he was just buying pizza. I guess someone stabbed him. But I don't think that was all that had happened. I think there must have been more to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember going to the Bronx Hospital when that happened to him. And there were certain events which and things which really made you want to stay in your house a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because either you were part of a certain lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
or you weren't. And I think the big loss was not really talking to anybody. Although we did have our local philosophers, you know, who would, you know, be at the barber shop or stand on the corner and talk about things. I had a friend, Gerald Hudson, who was very, very well read, and we talk about Malcolm X. We talk about civil rights quite a bit, and then there were just street philosophers. One guy we call Windmill, who would go like this all the time, flap his arms, and then he'd come to you and say, you know, something like, trees can fly. Did you know that? You know, look at them fly, and they're blowing in. You know, he tell you something to whet your appetite. And we didn't know whether this guy was, you know, was a wino. It probably was a wino. There's a lot of winos. In those days, people would drink this chemical wine a lot in the Bronx.
Like Gypsy Rose or
Well, Swiss Up.
Swiss Up. Okay.
Yeah, Swiss Up was it looked like lime juice,
Uh-huh.
and it didn't have one grape in it.
Swiss Up. Okay.
Yeah, and
What-
investigate Swiss Up.
What about Ripple?
Yeah, Swiss Up, Ripple.
Ripple.
Yeah, all.
Did you drink Scubanong?
Oh, I didn't drink.
Oh, you didn't drink?
No, I didn't drink. I
Wow.
didn't smoke. But people around me did, and I seen people that chemical wines, we called it, would rot your brain.
Wow.
you know, it would rot your brain. But, so a lot of people did that, and, you know, marijuana, and I guess other drugs. But, it was, you know, when the rhythm was happening, the projects were happening. The Bronx was happening, you know, because we also once a week would come up here to Fordham Road, to Gun Hill Road, where Evander Childs High School is.
Right.
And that's where my cousins lived. They went to Evander. Me and my brother went to Taft.
Got it. Now, how did you end up going to Taft? Is that where most people from your local junior high?
Well, there was either Morris High School,
Right.
Taft High School.
What about Clinton?
Clinton was too far up. You had to take the bus to go to Clinton. It was an all-boys school. My cousin went to Clinton, but they had a good football team, supposedly. Roosevelt High School was another high possibility. But somehow it was deducted that Taft was a better school because it was mixed.
Right, yeah, there's still some Jewish students there.
Yeah, it was mixed, so go to a high school that's mixed and it might be a better school.
Right. Now, so you went to Taft. Did you get involved in music there?
No, not at all. Wow, not at all. I should have, but I didn't. I didn't. I just liked the idea that you could walk there from a house and you had different classes and different teachers. That was really cool. And you walk home and you'd get out by 2 o'clock. You were finished. You couldn't beat that. So it was about, you know, that augmented with self-education and a blend of things. But I didn't, for some reason, I didn't, because I didn't really make a commitment to be a musician until I was like 18. You know, 17, 18.
So when you're at Taft, what did you see yourself doing in terms of making a living? Did you have part-time
I was
jobs?
afraid. I was afraid. I didn't know how. I didn't want to work on a Coca-Cola truck. I had to determine that. I didn't want to work on the Silver Cup bread truck or the Wonder Bread truck. There was a terrible fight one day between the Silver Cup bread guy and the Wonder Bread guy in a store over putting the bread up. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, I was really like in a, was that me? Excuse me.
That's okay.
Probably do it. Okay. Hello? Okay, I'll get him back. I have some people. You can edit this, right?
Yeah,
I'll call him back.
we can edit, yeah.
Okay.
So, all right, but you're in Taft, you're playing music on the side?
Yeah, I'm playing music. I'm doing different things. I'm writing a lot. That's the period where I was writing a lot of poetry, writing a lot of plays. Because when I was in Taft, I had a teacher named Vincent Basallo who read my writing, and he took me down to Judson Church.
Christian Memorial, right?
Yeah, where I met Al Carmine's. And so we were trying to say, oh, well, I like this. We're going to try to stage this. We're going to try to do something with this stuff. So I said, I said, because I was really into, you know, Nikki Giovanni, Mary Baraka, Larry Neal, all the black poets I was into, you know, James Baldwin. And so it was very, 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 good period that time. They had the Black Panther office up on Boston Road.
Right.
I would visit, go up there, but they weren't interested in music so much. I was trying to get them interested in Archie Shepp, some of the Charles Mingus, and some of the music that was jazz music that was political, but they weren't. You know.
So it's interesting. There are all these teachers who are influencing you, but the school institutionally doesn't give you a focus, like writing plays for school or playing music for the school.
Not necessarily. It was always, you know, something, a reaction to the school, or a reaction to where you jump off the tracks and you're on the train going somewhere, but you jump off the tracks and there's a story off the tracks on the side of the road that's more interesting than the story you're learning, you're headed towards. And that's when I began to get into independent film at that time, because the idea of the whole theory of what Stan Brakhage was into, the filmmaker, was that your peripheral vision is much wider than your focus vision. And so the knowledge was over here and over there. So if you're just focusing on going down there to get that what's here, there's more here, there's more, and there's more there. And those were the harmonics in the music, those were the sounds that you call blurred, that you call sort of colors. And so it was very interesting to begin to get into those things, because that's where inspiration lived. And so that study also, you're studying. My aunt was a Jehovah's Witness, so I'm studying that.
Your mom?
My aunt.
Your aunt was a Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah, my aunt Elvira, she was a devout Jehovah's Witness, so she would come over every Saturday, and I'd take these, Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained. So I was beginning to get idea of spirituality also, and also listening to John Coltrane, Love Supreme. So everything was coming together in its own way, and still you had the windows, like in the Bronx, in the projects, you look out the window of PS 132 was every Saturday morning they had the drum and bugle corps. They'd wake you up on Saturday morning. They were playing and marching, and then what I really liked doing was listening to the kids play in the yard. All these kids and the pitter patter of the feet and the laughing. And so I would really just go and just listen to that, and that was like music to me. So I was in heaven in the Bronx. I mean, really. And then what happened when I left around 72, 73, I got married in 75, and moved out of the Bronx officially. But when I come up and visit my mother, who was still there, my father had passed away already, there was nothing there. She had to, she used to be able to walk to a drugstore, and then she had to take a bus to a drugstore. Everything was closing.
Yeah, so the buildings were either burning or being abandoned.
And I would go to a place, I forget the name of the avenue, it was a place that the singer Maxine Sullivan was up there. It's called
Ritter Place. Oh, the house that Jazz built.
The house that Jazz built,
yeah, okay. That is on Stebbins Avenue.
Okay. And there was nothing else in the block except the house that Jazz built.
So who told you about that? It was just...
I just found out about it and ran into this guy, Louis McMillan, and Bertha Hope.
Oh, Bertha, oh yeah, sure. We interviewed her, and Bertha and Elmo Hope.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I would start going up. That was one of my stops when I, to go up there. And,
wow.
And I'd play up there, and that's where I met Maxine Sullivan. And
what instrument were you playing at that time?
Bass. I was always playing the bass.
Okay, so this is, so you moved from the cello to the bass?
Yeah. And I was playing bass. This is the early 70s.
Right.
And so you had and then in 1973, there was a place called the Third World Cultural Center.
Wow.
Run by Ben Caldwell. That was on Park Avenue and 167th Street.
The Third World Cultural Center, because I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, before. Run by a poet, writer named Ben Caldwell, and it was like the place in Brooklyn, 10 Claver place called the East.
Yeah, that I know about.
And but it was the same place. It was upstairs, and I did a residency there. I had a big band up there called the Amic Orchestra, 1974. Sun Ra played up there. He'd come up from Philadelphia every week and play.
Third World Cultural Center on
Yeah.
167th and Park Avenue.
Yeah.
Damn.
And so that was really like one of the hubs
Uh-huh.
that we played, the Salt and Pepper, the Sugar and Spice. And I always wanted to do a concert at the community center on 69th Street, which I still would like to do
Uh-huh.
one of these days.
At the Claremont houses.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I always wanted to. Because I love when the Jazzmobile would come by. Because the Jazzmobile, you know, would have the traveling bandstand.
Right.
And would come by, and it was great to see people come out their houses and listen to music. Because the theory was, you know, they had 16 stories. You had like A, B, C, D, E, about 7 apartments on each. They even had like a 9-room apartment in the project.
Wow.
Okay? Like when you had like 11 people in the family, and so what happened was, I always said, well, you have enough people in one project building to fill Carnegie Hall. And so the goal was, how do you get these people out of the projects to come out and listen to music? And that's still a question.
Yeah. I have very good friends with the principal of PS 55 in the Claremont houses, Louis Torres.
Okay.
And he would love to meet you and have you play at that school. He
Okay.
has, it's an amazing school because he has a farm in the school, the Bronx, the Green Bronx Machine. He has a step team. He has teams. It's like a little island of energy, and you know, and
Yeah.
so that's your old.
Oh, I'd love to.
Yeah, I will make sure you connected with. He's a great guy.
I'd love to.
But this is an amazing story about like finding all sorts of inspiration in this, you know, very vibrant, you know, environment, which, you know, people under stress, but there's a lot of variety and creativity to stimulate you.
Yeah, and there was time for meditation. I mean, we spent a lot of time doing nothing. Just sitting on the bench and just like, you know, what you call, you know, people walk by and you laugh at them. That was a big thing to do. Or, you know, you saw, you know, what they call messing with people.
Uh-huh.
And that was like, you know, well, you just mess with, but then, of course, you can't mess with the wrong person.
Uh-huh.
See, and then in the projects there was a show, Clint Eastwood show called Rawhide.
Yeah.
And there was a character in there, something about track down. And so we had when they began to put housing police in the projects, we had a cop called Track Down. And he would always mess with us. And it seemed like if you were doing something wrong or climbing over a fence or going in the grass or doing something, Track Down would be there. And he'd get your name and say he's going to tell your mother. He wouldn't arrest you, he'd just say, I'm going to tell your mother. And so you had, look up on the roof, there was Track Down, there was a guy named Brother. Now, Brother it was similar to the Hunchback of Notre Dame. He would like, or the Phantom of the Opera. Like, you know, in a hot day, you know, people would be opening the fire hydrants, and then you look up and they'd see Brother up there. And he'd be on this building, and he'd be over there, and he'd be running around. So Brother came down one day, and he took a Hawaiian punch can and put it over the hydrant. And then this guy comes by with his Fleetwood Cadillac, and that thing got wet, and Brother, boy, this guy got out and had a tire iron. This is my thing of how people would really upset me, the violence that people would like. So he tracked Brother down and almost beat him to death with a tire iron. And you know, blood was all over the place. And then I seen people, you know, hit people with their car and then get out and start beating the guy because the guy, you know, said, what, you know, I just came from the car wash and you damaged my car. You know, things like that, like crazy things where, you know, which was like a little dark side of life, but, you know, but that's the way it was. You know, the thing is that if you survived, part of it was like was luck.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it was luck, because some people had, you know, awful parents. Their parents, they'd be left alone all the time. Their parents would be working all the time, but they survived. They somehow they didn't get into trouble. They knew,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if trouble was coming down this way, they'd be on another street.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, it wasn't like our troubles on you know, on Clay Avenue, so I'm not gonna walk. I'm gonna walk down Teller Avenue. But it wasn't like they calculated. It was just, you know, you could call it a guardian angel or whatever. People had that. I think people have that today,
Mm-hmm.
where you know, people are just kind of protected and have things that kind of help them out.
So how long did that Third World Center last? How long did it stay open?
I don't know. I think 73, 74, 7. It might have been there till the 80s.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we got to look that up. I
Yeah,
mean,
look
that,
it up. Third
yeah,
World Cultural
was
Center.
the East has been documented pretty well.
Has it? Okay. Yeah.
G2 Woozy, a friend of mine, is writing a memoir with him,
Okay.
and he was very involved in the East, the Brooklyn activist.
Yeah. Because I know they moved from the East to the Armory,
Yeah.
you know, the African Street Festival,
Mhm.
July 4th, and then I think they still have it, but I don't know where. 'Cause I don't make those anymore.
Mhm. So what year did you move out downtown?
1975.
1975.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were in the Bronx for like 20 years,
23 years.
23 years. So do you define yourself as sort of a Bronx person shaped and molded in that world?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do. When people say they're from the Bronx, and I say, well, where were you born? And they say, I was born in Virginia. I said, you're not from the Bronx. And then they said, what do you mean? I went there when I was 2 years old. I said, I know, but you don't have Bronx blood. And so they said, what do you mean by Bronx blood? I said, well, you know, you born in the Bronx hospital, they got this blood, you get the Bronx blood. And I said, so I dote on that. That, you know, like, especially in the music crowd, everybody say, well, you're from New York, but they're not really from New York, they come from different places. And so there are very few people actually that I knew who were born in the Bronx.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but they were raised in the Bronx. I said, okay, I know you were raised in the Bronx, so you're from the Bronx. But it's, so I don't really like, you know, then somebody told me about the boogie down Bronx.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard that before.
Uh-huh.
I said, I said, either I was asleep, I never heard that expression.
Uh-huh.
So this guy used it. I said, well, you weren't born in the Bronx. You didn't come up in the Bronx. He said, well, no. So there's those kind of expressions, but I never really, like they started giving out money because you were born in the Bronx. I'll be on the first online
Mm-hmm.
to say I'm from the Bronx, but I don't carry it as a, you know, as a plaque. That I'm,
Right.
You know, from the Bronx. But I do when I hear it. You know, this thing you kind of say. You know, who's here from Brooklyn? You know, who's here from New Jersey? You know, you kind of like
Right.
go with it because it was kind of feeling you get. But I'm not.
Yeah. Now, when you started playing music, did you think of that as your primary income support, or you needed to have a day job to support it?
I had a day job at first. You know, I had a day job till, because, you see, before I got married, you know, I had to, I went to my father-in-law and asked him permission to get married, all that kind of stuff. But I had to have a job. I couldn't say, well, I'm going to be a musician.
Uh-huh.
So I got a job working at the housing authority.
Right.
You know, because it paid good money and it's easy to get a CETA program.
Right.
And so I was working in the housing. I worked in the boiler room. I worked in the gardens. I worked with the maintenance guys. So I learned a lot about electricity, about putting things together. So it was a good job. But in 1975, I quit my job. I mean, later on, 1975, 76, I quit my job, and I concentrated on just playing music from then on. You know, I played at the 5 spot with Don Cherry for a week. And then from then on, I concentrated on music. And I didn't know how I was going to make a living. But my rent was like $90 a month. and it wasn't, and that's what the rent was on 6th Street between 1st and 2nd.
Right. In Alphabet City.
Yeah, it was 75, and then it went to 90.
Mhm.
So it wasn't that big. It wasn't like it is now. So I didn't really think about sculpting a way of how to make a living. I was never really worried about it too much. I guess I should have been, but I wasn't.
Mhm. Now, did you have, from your growing up years, close friends who you stayed in touch with?
No. No, I don't have anybody I stay in touch with except my cousins, who there was a long period where I didn't stay in touch with them, but then I'm back in touch with them now. But as far as the neighborhood and people I grew up with, there's one guy I knew Gerald Hudson, who actually became a labor organizer, and I like to look him up and at some point, and actually look up some of the people I grew up with. I mean, I don't know where they are, what they're doing, but I've never stayed in touch with them because I'm not like a stay in touch. You know, I mean, I'm traveling all around the world playing music and doing all this.
Now, as a bassist, who are your major influences musically?
Well, I was influenced by everybody that played the bass, but I studied with Jimmy Garrison and Wilbur Ware and Richard Davis and Art Davis and Milton I studied with also. So all of those people I was influenced by, but mostly anybody that played music and played the bass, I had like a big curiosity. So I liked all kinds of music, and I was influenced by it all, and yeah, it all made a little imprint on
Right.
me.
Lisa, do you have some questions, to kick into this? I have a few more.
Not right now. I forgot the one that I had because we moved on to something else.
Mm-hmm.
Can I insert one question? I'm wondering if you could tell the story about how you got your first bass.
Well, my first bass was I purchased at Bronin's Music Store, which is on Webster Avenue, not
Right.
too far from here.
It's still
It
there.
still exists. And they had a Juzak bass in the for $100. It was a wood bass, carved bass, and I put down $1, and I would hold an instrument for you. So you put down $1, then each week you pay whatever you wanted. Sometimes you skip a few weeks and a few weeks. Then you pay $10 and $5, and so I don't know actually whether I actually paid the whole $100. I mean, the guy might have said, you're paying $98. Please take it. Or I might have paid the whole $100. It's kind of vague now, but it was paid like I mean that's how you did things. Because we get these little odd jobs carrying people's groceries from the supermarket or doing this or doing that, and or finding $1 here in the house. We weren't very entrepreneurial, me and my brother. We would, I had a typewriter once. I remember getting a typewriter and then later on selling the typewriter because I wanted to get something else with it. So you use barter, exchange, all kinds of different ways of getting money to buy records, and but eventually I got a bass.
Mm-hmm. And this is while you're still in the Bronx?
Yeah, I was definitely in the Bronx, and then leaving Bronin's Music Store to get on the Bronx 41 bus, go back home, just about to get on the bus, and the guy says to me, hey, bass player, you a bass player? So I turn around, and I'm trying to say, who's he talking to? Because I didn't know anything about the bass, but he said, if I'd have been playing a flute, you wouldn't have known. Or if I played the piano, but a bass you can't hide. So he said, come to this jam session. So I got invited to a jam session. And on Amsterdam Avenue, I went to the jam session, and I had been playing along with records because I ran as bass player, Charlie Hayden, who played with Ornette Coleman. He said play along with records. Went to the jam session, and I played, until my fingers were full of blood. I had no chops. And then I kind of faked getting out of it until I have another thing to go to.
Mhm.
And because all these guys were older than me. And then I said, okay, I got to learn how to play the bass. So then I went to the Jazz Music School,
Uh-huh.
which was IS 201 in Harlem.
Wow.
And that was every Saturday. And then I began to,
Mhm.
to study.
This is when you're in high school, or this is you a little older?
Like kind of out of high school.
Right.
You know, like the just getting out.
Mhm.
And, yeah.
Do you have any recollections of when the fires hit the Bronx and buildings started burning and stuff, the abandonment and that whole phase?
Not really, because I was absent that day, or was not there, or I was living downtown.
Uh-huh.
I don't know the year they
Mhm.
started, but I saw it on TV,
Mm-hmm.
and I know, like I said, visiting my mom, that things were missing, that the infrastructure was
Mm-hmm.
beginning to.
Because they knocked down the
Right.
3rd Avenue L at a certain point.
Yeah, that I remember, because then they replaced that with the Bronx 41 bus, because
Right.
that was, you have to take the subway to 161st and then take the bus home.
Mm-hmm.
And that I remember very clearly, because I remember it used to be 15 cents to ride the subway when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Then it went up to 35 cents. Then it might have gone to 50 or 75 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it went from 75 cents to $1.50. It doubled somewhere in there. And I remember that the 3rd Avenue L, it had straw seats,
Mm-hmm.
and it had fans.
Yeah, I remember.
You know.
So at what point did you become someone who people say, well, we got to get him? You know, where you got to, the skill got to the point where you were really in demand.
Well, the more I played, the more I traveled, the more I, it was like in the 80s.
Uh-huh. So it's in the 80s when you clicked as a...
Yeah, as far as being known as
Uh-huh.
a musician and getting reviews, and yeah.
And then you were able, so by that time you weren't working any other jobs?
Since 1975, I wasn't working
Right.
any other job.
Uh-huh. So you were just like, this was...
Yeah, I mean, every now and then I had to get a job. You know,
Uh-huh.
like I laid the carpet at Studio 54. You know, I got a day job for one day, and the part of that job was to, we're gonna put down this red carpet at Studio 54.
Okay.
So I did that. You know, things like that. When you needed money, you had to do it. I had
Mhm.
a family.
Mhm.
So but most of the times I didn't have to do a day job.
Mhm.
I began to go to Europe in 1978,
Wow.
and then
And now, was this as part of an ensemble?
yeah,
Or?
yeah, and then I just kept going and going and going,
Mhm.
and still going today.
So who was what was the name of the group that you first went to
It
Europe
was
with?
called Ensemble Muntu,
Yeah.
and Jamil Moondock, and actually Billy Bang was in that band.
We interviewed him.
Billy Bang?
Billy Bang. So you worked with him.
Oh, yeah.
Damn. Do you know his story? Billy Bang's story? Yeah. Yeah.
You know, Billy Bang used to, you know, in the projects, you know, we'd be practicing in my living room. And my mother would be cooking dinner, and me and Bang would be working on our lines.
Because he was a basketball player
Yeah.
when he was younger, went to Vietnam. He was a tunnel rat in Vietnam,
Yeah.
became radicalized, was with the Panthers, and went down with the Panthers to buy guns and,
Yeah.
and saw a violin.
Right.
And he became a jazz violinist.
See, because those same guys, Badu, Clive Hunter, when they went down to Baltimore, see, Clive, whose sister is Charlene Hunter Galt. And
Wow.
And he went to music and art.
Uh-huh.
And so they were going to rob a bank, and with those weapons. And they told Billy, and he was very intelligent. Bilal, he changed his name to Bilal Abdul Rahman when he was in prison. But he told Billy that gave Billy the wrong time of the bank robbery, because that when they went down there, Billy bought a violin, and so I don't know what time the robbery was supposed to be, but when Billy showed up, they had already been arrested or on their way to jail, and Billy had another lease on life.
Wow. So they got all arrested down there.
Well, they got arrested in New York for
The robbery
yeah,
was in New York.
Yeah, I think it was in New York. Wherever they were going to rob the bank, they failed and got caught.
Right.
And Billy was not with them, so he was saved.
Uh-huh.
And
So he was living in the village also when you were down there?
yeah. Billy lived on 13th Street.
Wow. And so you went to Europe together with that
Yeah.
Muntu?
First time he went, first time I went. We went together.
Damn. Lot to think about.
Yeah. No.
I mean, jazz geniuses out of the Bronx, you know?
And Billy was real, Billy was born in Alabama, but, raised in Harlem, but he really, we had a band a couple of years ago, called the Boys from the Bronx.
You're kidding.
With the drummer Barry Alshaw,
Uh-huh.
who's from the Bronx, went to Taft High School.
Maxine Gordon interviewed Barry Altshaw.
And,
You know Maxine?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And Roy Campbell, who was from the Bronx,
Uh-huh.
myself and Billy Band, we called it Boys from the Bronx. And because we were from the Bronx.
What year, was that the 80s and 90s?
That was like shortly before Billy died, about 5-6 years
Oh,
before he died.
so he only died, so this is pretty recently.
Yeah, Billy died 2014.
Yeah, because we interviewed him down in his apartment in Harlem.
Yeah.
So you're playing as the Boys from the Bronx and like 10 years ago or so.
Yeah,
less.
yeah.
Wow.
That was one of the last things we did.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a bunch of musicians from the Bronx
Mm-hmm.
who, or at least even they're from someplace else and they
Yeah,
ended up
yeah.
living here.
Mm-hmm. So did you continue writing, doing poetry, doing
Oh yeah,
plays?
I do it now.
You still do?
I do it now. I
Uh-huh.
do it now.
Did you ever publish a book of poems or anything like that? Or
Well, I have a book called what's the name of that book? Who Owns Music? Who Owns Music, which is a book of prose and philosophy and theories about music.
Really?
I'll get you.
Oh, I got it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I've got 2 interview books I did called Conversations 1 and 2, where I interview musicians, and then Billy Bang's in that book.
Wow.
And
Conversations 1 and 2.
Yes.
Can you get them on Amazon?
Yeah,
So it's under your name.
yeah,
So if I
I
put,
can send
well,
you some
yeah,
links.
no, I gotta get these. Yeah.
yeah. And then one called Voices in the First Person, which is the interviews of 4 visual artists. It's got their paintings,
Uh-huh.
and it's got some poetry of mine in there. So I
Yeah.
so it's like the childhood dream. That was a dream, to come, my first dream was to be a teacher,
Uh-huh.
and then my second dream was to write books, and
And you've done it.
yeah,
Damn.
being a musician was a later on dream,
So to write books was your first dream.
No, be a teacher.
Teacher was the first dream.
Yeah.
Now, do you teach music? Did you end up doing that at all?
Yeah, I gave telling Cisco. I gave a lecture at the new school yesterday,
Uh-huh.
and because I hated school so much, I had to say, I'm going to be the ideal teacher, and that's what made me want to be a teacher.
Right. Now, did you ever teach individuals,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have people come to my house. I taught up at Bennington College,
Okay.
NYU. I taught at New England Conservatory.
Uh-huh.
I do,
So
different,
yeah.
different things around the world,
Uh-huh.
and and it's just basically about aesthetics and the philosophy of being yourself, and finding yourself, finding your sound, and dipping in what we call the tone world.
Damn. It's pretty spiritual. It's yeah. I mean, because I think of I have musicians who teach music, like at the Manhattan
Yeah,
School.
well, see that a lot of people can do that. Eighth notes, quarter notes.
Uh-huh.
But what makes you an individual is the aesthetics, is your philosophy, is your intent when you play. Your idea that music can heal, that music can uplift people.
Mm.
Like and not just be able to organize it and play it and read a score. But there's, like.
Are there videos of you talking about music is healing?
On YouTube.
On YouTube, because, I mean, I've sort of stumbled into this through, I came up as an athlete, but I think that in some ways music and the arts are even
Right.
more important now for young people than sports, and,
Right,
getting
right.
music into the schools, but also this idea of healing is very powerful.
Oh, yeah.
So you have videos of.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of talk to be given. Just, look up interviews. I always mention this stuff in interviews I do. And there's even like a lecture from Bydgoszcz, Poland that I did. And actually I was with Billy Bang that day. We were doing a duo tour. And we got up that morning to go to the train station. And there's nothing worse than a cold train station in Poland at 5 in the morning in the winter. Oh, we were cold. Just saying, I got cold. I got a chill. And we got on that, we were like snuggling together on that train, because it was like, where's the heat? There's no heat. But it's beautiful.
Yeah. I'm trying to take all this in. It's intense, but it's also really inspiring. That just thinking, genius and creativity are everywhere.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and like small town in Canada or somewhere in Soweto there or somewhere in Thailand, there's somebody like everybody's doing this and then somebody's staying back and creating, using it as a creative.
And they were that way. I told somebody yesterday, I said, they were that way when they were 5 years old. As I see it, you can see it when they were 7, they were 8, and you can see if there's nothing happens to this person and he's allowed to have things flow through him and blossom, it's there. See, I think that everybody has the potential, but they don't really, because everything is inside you already.
Mm.
It's just a matter of lighting. It's like lighting a
Got to
lamp.
get you together with Luis Torres, this
Yeah.
principal. The two of you will just, because he's, that's the poorest housing project in the Bronx now, Claremont Houses, where he is. And he, and he's trying to find that in all these kids. He works 24/7 at it. He's like, so, yeah, this is what educators now, the best educators are doing, finding that spark
Yeah.
and letting, unleashing it, and, especially with all this crazy testing they're trying to do, is rote learning, and
Well, the thing is, like, the first thing you learn when you go to school is that George Washington never told a lie. And so, if that's what schooling is based off of, and then you say, well, facts, like, well, the War of 1812, the War of 1813, what happened here, what happened there, and you're like you're like 2015, and and it's like you don't even know why you're here. You don't even know why you were born. You don't even know how you got here. And they're trying to tell you about the war in 1812. It's like that could be the most interesting thing in the universe, learning about a war in 1812. But how do you get it to this person so that it's interesting, so that you can show them that it's full of life, and that you, and when you learn about it, you can learn about yourself. And that's the goal of a teacher. I mean, a good teacher can analyze a situation. And I noticed this when I was in early junior high school. You have one kid always comes late. And you say, well, and most teachers just say, you come late one more time, you're out of my class. But it's like, okay, why does he come late? Did you ask him why he comes late? Did you find out what's going on? And then when you find out what's going on, you find out that he's the oldest brother. He's got to take one kid to this school, his younger sister, and he's got to take his other little kid to this school. Then he's got to go to school. But you don't even find that out. You meet with your label, he's stupid, he's this, he's that, you're out, you're going to be punished. A kid in the math class, Rafael Vega. He'd always sit in the back of the classroom and he'd have his artwork. He'd just be like looking out the window and he could just look at something, it's a photograph, and then next thing you know it's on paper. And they said, Raphael, you know, you're stupid, man. Raphael is stupid. He don't want to do any math. You know, blah, 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 blah. But it said, did you ever look at his sketchbook? I said, no, I didn't look at his sketchbook. Why don't you take a look in there and then say, Raphael, you know, man, that's beautiful. Why don't you, let's talk about how math relates to this. So let's talk about.
There's this rapper Nas who talks about this as he's grown, you know.
I know Nas and his father.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Olu Dara's his father. Yeah, we did a movie with Olu Dara and Billy Bang about slavery. I have it at home. It's called Coney in the Hollow. It was never completed, but I've got clips. There's a guy from CBS was doing it, and I have about 10 minutes of the outtakes of this movie. It's on VHS. Jesus Christ.
Okay.
So you know, it's a small world and things get connected, but you know it's like you're not gonna let anybody out of this classroom without lighting that fire. You know, you're not going to let them out and just let them go. You know, you're going to chase them down the street and find some way of reaching something inside this kid, this person.
I think that's what I try to do.
Yeah,
that's why I'm 71 years old and won't retire.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, God, we should keep you here.
There you go.
You know, talk to everybody you're trying to teach, man. It's, wow. I had no idea. Yeah. So, this is, I mean, I definitely need to connect you.
Okay.
I have these great Bronx principals I work with whose philosophy is so aligned with yours, and I'd love to bring you together with them.
It's a philosophy that you have to come up with. You know, it's like having a kid, you know, you have vegetables and you have candy. All right, you have a kid. Okay, you give them the candy or give them the vegetables. I mean, you know, if you think about it, you come up with all, the answers all fall into place of how human beings operate and what they need. And it's very easy solution if people would just, you know, think about it. And you find all people come up with the same answers and they all can relate. And if they hook up, you got a nice community. You know, you got a nice community and a lot of connections that should be connected.
Yeah. I'm really blown away by the Billy Bang connection because, you know, I still have the albums that he did with Vietnam.
Yeah.
Like, listen to this. He goes to Vietnam. He's a tunnel rat, which is the most dangerous, because he was small and athletic, the most dangerous single thing you could do in Vietnam. Comes back as a black revolutionary, becomes a jazz violinist, and goes back to Vietnam to does albums with Vietnamese musicians, and they're incredible. Yeah. You know, and this is from like Mauritania, from the, and you know, so and
Band of Child, that's what Bang went. And it was reconciliation, because his whole life he's being tormented by this Vietnam thing. You know, I mean, and I don't want to get into it, but you know, so just then, you know, he's beginning to get some kind of solace, some kind of, and then, you know, Agent Orange gives him lung cancer.
That's what he,
yeah.
Agent Orange.
Yeah. You know, so it's kind of ironic, but if he had been alive, he was really beginning to make that next step, that next leap, and then I think he would have just kept going.
Damn.
Yeah, because he was a brilliant cat, Bang.
Oh, it was a pretty the experience of interviewing him, one of the most memorable.
Very frank, very clear, very honest, and then he had this, you know, this natural brilliance, you know.
Yeah.
And, but things that his mother told him, don't go. You know,
Yeah.
He signed up.
Yeah.
But, you know, you make mistakes in life,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. And, you know, also Bertha Hope, we had an amazing interview with too, so. Well, I know you've gotta go
Yes, I
downtown,
do.
and, but this was an amazing experience, and I hope we can stay in touch, because there's so much that you do that connects to what I'm trying to do as a teacher, but also in terms of revitalizing our schools,
Okay,
you know, so, yeah.
all right.
But any questions?
I think my question was answered by one of what he was saying.
Yeah, Sarah?
No, I don't think so. But it was
Yeah, I'm just,
Okay, so it's a wrap?
Mhm.
It's a wrap? Okay.